Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic. Before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to share some exciting news. On Thursday, the 29th of May at 7 p.m, Socially Democratic will be recording our first ever live show before an audience, and we want you to be a part of it. We'll be recording the episode at the Toff in town at Curtin House in Melbourne's CBD on Swanston Street. So bring your friends, come and have a few drinks with us and celebrate Labor's historic landslide victory with like-minded comrades. And best of all, if you're a Patreon member and a campaign organiser or team leader level, you and a +1 can come for free. So just message us through our Patreon page and we'll leave your name at the door. And if you're not a Patreon member, tickets are only $15. We're not in it for the money. We're in it for the love, but we just need to cover the costs for booking the venue. The ticket details are in the show notes. So just click on that link and we hope to see you there. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. All right, we're taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And this is our first of many episodes in which we're going to unpack the landslide victory to Labor, I was about to say seat by seat, state by state and territory by territory. We won't get to that. Booth by booth, every single one of them that we won. We're going to look at every one of them. No, we're not going to do that, but we are going to do it by state, and we're going to start with New South Wales. So we're just going to call back all of our comrades that gave over their time to help us do our 3 hour and 45-minute monster Path to 76 episode. My brother ran a 3 hour 31 marathon. If he had listened to the podcast, he would have, 2 hour 31. He would have finished the marathon, had time to cool down, and the episode would still be going. That's how long that episode was. Anyway, let's not make it any longer than it needs to be. Joining him on the line from Sydney, he is Campaign Strategy Director at Unions New South Wales, and he's a good friend of mine, and it's great to have him back on the show. Todd Pinkerton, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. It's great to be back. I know we made a joke last time about how desperate I was to get on the podcast once, and now I've been on twice. Amazing.
Brilliant. Look what happens when you win, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm glad we're not doing this episode if the result was different.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. I do this episode anyway, so would have been a grim podcast. But thankfully for everyone in every state and territory, we're going to have a great conversation. Before we I get your overall observations of the result in New South Wales, just for the folks playing along at home, as I said before, we're recording this one on Wednesday, the 14th of May. This will go up on Friday later this week, so this will change a little bit, but probably not too much. The result in New South Wales in terms of party totals, there was a 1.8% swing to Labor on our primary, and there was a 4.9% swing against the coalition on their primary. That took Labor's two-party preferred with a 3.5% swing to 54.9%, and that meant that Labor gained the seats of Hughes and Banks. The ABC and the AEC are marking as a 3-seat gain because they're including Bennelong. Even though Bennelong was an incumbently held seat for Labor, it was a notionally Liberal seat based on the distribution. So we picked up 3 seats. Coalition lost 4. Others picked up 1. The seats that we talked about, and we'll unpack some of these in a moment, but the seats that we spoke about in the Path to 76 episode was Bennelong Gilmore, Paterson, Hunter, Robertson. We held all of those. The only seat that's still in doubt right now is Bradfield. But before we go into sort of a seat-by-seat analysis, to you, Todd, overall observations of the result in New South Wales, great night for the party in the Premier State?
Yeah, it was excellent. And obviously with the returning Prime Minister coming from New South Wales, it was a great night for celebration. I know the after party that cut to the Prime Minister's speech was held here in Sydney. So yeah, there's a lot to be celebrated. I think there's still some people. I've been making some phone calls the last couple of days, and there's still people I think still celebrating, or maybe still somewhat hungover from that big night. But yeah, there's a lot to be happy about. The result broadly really, really positive, obviously, and maybe defied all expectations. Like we're talking about, when the number of seats we've got in the 90s, right? We're outperforming some historic wins. There's a lot to be happy about, but there's a lot to happy with New South Wales, particularly some of the extra seats with JAG, some of those seats that have, marginal seat MPs have been putting blood, sweat, and tears into building support in those seats, and to see on the night them being pretty comfy is pretty nice. Like winning's great, but like winning comfortably is also pretty great, and it was really good. It's been a really positive night, and I feel like I'm doing one of those like post football match things, but like full credit to the team. Like everyone pulling in the right direction. And this was a state, as we said at the podcast right last time, this is the state, if you don't win some seats here, it's very hard to form government, right? And New South Wales Labor was at the high water mark, or what we thought was the high water mark. Turns out there's more water in the can, and we can get even high, we can get to a higher point on that. If Dunn was thinking in a lot of ways that a lot of the strategy was focusing, and we'll talk about this in a second, right? Like some of these seats were the strategy. That was the whole point. And if they weren't making inroads here, very hard to be forming government, very hard to be making a path to the lodge. So, yeah, lots to be happy about. I'm still celebrating. A lot of people are. It's been good.
It must have been a good night for the union movement as well, particularly, obviously, your unions, New South Wales, the peak body for affiliated unions in the state. You should be pretty proud of your efforts and more broadly the union movement's campaign in New South Wales. I know you allocated a lot of resources targeted into particular seats, and, that was repaid in spades with the return in the vote.
Yeah, and all the seats that we were targeting, great results in. We had nothing to sort of have to, Monday morning quarterback work out what went wrong, right? I think the union movement did play a really good role in this campaign. I mean, we have a lot to be quite. There's a lot of things that we won in the last 3 years for working people, and those things were very clearly at stake at this election, and I think we did a pretty good job of helping frame those things up. Particularly when you talk about a contrast, right, about like whose side are these leaders on. I think we're able to make a very clear message that like Albo is on the side of workers who a minimum wage increase is a really big deal. He is on the side of workers who now have new time to spend with their families or their friends because of the right to disconnect. There are almost certainly lives saved across the country because of the introduction of family and domestic violence leave of the national employment standards. Those are things that unions won, and they're possible because of the government that we've had for the last 3 years. And in the contrast, right, like we're talking about campaign strategy, right? It's one thing to give your side a strength. The best strength is also your opponent's weakness, if you can compare it in that way. And see, Dutton had just made himself so totally vulnerable on these things, like right to disconnect, on minimum wage increases, work from home. We talked about this before, like these industrial conditions became massive. And so we tried to frame up a campaign about whose side he is on and can you risk Peter Dutton. And the best I keep joking, the best campaign of the union movement had was Dutton during the campaign, right? Like during the middle of the cyclone, he flew to Justin Hems's mansion for a fundraiser. What a perfect demonstration in earned media of our campaign strategy playing out in real time. So, once again, full credit comment, but like full credit ACTU, Unions as well as the other TLCs, put a lot, and all the union movement, all the union members who campaigned. Like, there's been a lot of work to get this result, and yeah, we're also as stoked, if not more.
Do you think there's is this intentional? Do you remember like previous campaigns, like the first sort of union campaign at an electoral level, that in living memory anyway, was the Your Rights at Work campaign, and it was hailed as a breakthrough type of campaign, and therefore that I think people looked at that model of high vis, high profile activism on the streets, list building and conversations and all that kind of stuff, that was the way to go. Fast forward to then sort of the experiences of say 2019, and you know after we lost, you know you had union leaders on television saying we need to revisit the way that we conduct our campaigns in these political environments. And then in 2025, there was still campaigns going on at a local level, but it just, is it right to say that it wasn't as visible, like sort of in a big broadcast way, but in a subterranean way, these hard conversations, these targeted conversations we're having on the doors, at train stations, at shopping centres, at high-vis areas. Has the union movement tried to approach it in a different way now? Is that intentional, or is it just sort of an osmosis kind of thing?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of intentionality to it, right? I think you're right to work a historic campaign, you know, and I'd be remiss not to say it started here in New South Wales because that is true. There is a level of intentionality about, I think, the campaign strategy here, and I don't want to say too much because I know most of your, you know, the vast majority of your listeners are all good comrades who aren't giving this out, but like I'm sure there'll be some out there, and it's always remiss to talk about strategy openly, but I think with any good campaign strategy, you got to think about what your comparative advantage is. Like, what's the thing that you do better than anyone else in the field? And I always used to say to people in the movement when we're running a campaign, like, you're right to work, excellent campaign, high vis, earned media. You know, at that time, the best strategy they did was they put campaign leaders and spokespeople on a big orange bus and they toured the country, right? And they built momentum in all these places, and they created spot fires that the Howard government then had to go and try and resolve, right? And they went and found case studies and all this sort of stuff. That was the best tactic for that time. But if you ran that campaign again in that tactic right now, I'm not sure that you would get the same results. What I think is the real value, right, is our relationships with workers. Like those conversations in workplaces, those conversations at the water cooler, the conversations at the community picnic, those convos I think are much more valuable. And I always say to people, like, just because when I get new field organisers in, and Stephen, you know, we've done some work with you, you've seen this, I always say to people, don't cosplay as the Labor Party when you want to run a campaign as a union. Don't just be like, okay, well, our job is to pick another colour, put that shirt on, then we'll stand at the street stall and we'll hand out a flyer at the same time, and then we're going to call people, and then we're going to announce our policies. And it's like, there's a role for that, right? There's a role for, particularly if you're running a campaign where your job is to go, here are the 5 things that we need, our members need. We're going to put these on the national agenda. And there's a bit of that, but actually using the tactics of political parties who have completely different resources, completely different resource constraints, electoral resources. It's like, why play that game? There are better things that we could do. So we are putting a lot more time and energy into earned media, to advertising, to workplace conversations, to talking to people about the things that matter, and also staying in our lane a little bit, like focusing on the things that we have currency to. So yeah, like maybe it's not as visible, but the proof's in the results. And like I said, it's I don't want to go too much into it. There's a lot more to that, but I think we're kind of getting that balance right. But like anything, 2 election cycles from now, that strategy is not going to be right. There's going to be a new thing that's going to need to happen. So it's about keeping your strategy updated to the times, right? Like 8, 10 years, 12 years ago, influencers weren't a thing that you needed to focus on. Now that's effectively your earned media strategy is working with those people. Like, you've got to move with the times.
Well, let's take a look at some of those seats that we talked about in our preview episode. And I want to start with Bennelong.
Yep.
I wonder how badly the Chinese spy comments and the remarks by Dunn in one of the debates where he said China's our number one adversary played out in a seat like Bennelong, because I know it went down like a lead balloon in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, right? Like the Libs, they realised they had a problem with Chinese Australians. They seem to have this fixation on them and sort of talk about them in a sort of national security context rather than in the broader multiculturalism of Australia. There clearly was some strategy, right, for them to focus on this community, to rebuild the links, to definitely rebuild things post-Scott Morrison. But true to form, right, you put a microphone in front of a Liberal shadow minister and they're going to revert. Like I had an old mentor who said, you know, you rise to the heights of your ideals, but you fall to your habits, right? And the problem is, like, straight to form, an opportunity to leverage this thinking. Like they had this image in their head of like a different type of voter, and maybe that was the point of that's what they were saying this about, to try to whip up. I don't know. It's hard to know, but it's really a total own goals. Definitely would have hurt. That being said, with respect to Bennelong, Jerome Laxalt, incredible candidate, great campaign, really strategic, really well resourced. He's been working that electorate. Like, if you ask Jerome, he's been running for Bennelong, or at least he's been running for this particular election for the last 15 years of his engagement in the, like, every conversation he's had, every general. I've spoken to people who have run into him in the shops, think he's the best guy in the world. I know someone who once who interviewed him for a university assignment, and he immediately worked them into a campaign so they could do a journalism assignment. Like, he gets it. Like, he is a genuine community hero, and the voters have rewarded him for it.
To your earlier point, I'm just baffled by Dutton on this. Like, clearly the party in New South Wales, the Liberal Party in New South Wales, knew that they needed to win back this community. I mean, they pre-selected a guy called Scott Young, and I know that there was a whole bunch of stories that came out mid-campaign that weren't great for him, but there appeared to be some kind of strategy to win back Chinese Australian voters after the experience they had with Morrison. Did Dutton just not get the brief? Like, it was almost, you can almost see as the words escaped his mouth in the debate that, you know, if it was like a West Wing episode, that those back at campaign headquarters would have been screaming at the television, no!
Yeah, Josh Lyman ripping his hair out,
why?
kicking in.
Why did you just say that? You know?
Yeah.
Just unbelievable.
True to form, man. It's we fall to our habits, and the Liberal Party's had a long-term play on this stuff, and it's hard to shake off, and it's a real challenge for them. Like, I'm sure we're going to do there's a lot of post-modern Lib content out right now. This has got to be one. This is it's it's not good.
Well, it was great. I tell you what is good.
Great for campaigning.
Yeah, I know. We had a 13% swing to us on our primary. So Labor and Jerome are now sitting on 45% primary and now on basically 60% two-party preferred. Huge result. 9% swing on 2PP. So well done, Jerome. Let's couple up Paterson and Hunter. Up in that part of New South Wales, we were a little bit nervous about Paterson. Felt more comfortable about Hunter. In the end, didn't have any reason to be worried about either of them. But what's your takeaway from those two seats?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last time, right? Like, these are the seats that they clearly were targeting, right? Like, I made the joke before, and I'll do it again, right? When Dutton was sitting in Gina Reinhardt's boardroom, working out his plan when he first became opposition leader, these were the seats he had his eyes on, right? These outer ring, outer metropolitan, particularly around like regional centres like Newcastle and Hunter. These were the voters, right? The voters who feel like maybe the public transport system hasn't kept up with life, cost of living's been tough. They're probably seeing some economic transformation about jobs. These were the kind of, we talked before about like Dutton kind of trying to grab a little bit of the Trumpism, the parts of the Trumpism that make political sense, like speaking out for those that feel disconnected from the mainstream. The results here clearly show that strategy did not work, right? And when you announce policy like nuclear energy, you're doing it for this place, but it just did not bite, did not go. And partly that's because of the quality of the candidates. I think both candidates did good long campaigns. I said before, I think there's a real emphasis in New South Wales for our candidates to have a backstory, a reason to vote for them beyond their pre-selection. That helps you because when the wind is blowing, you get to ride it all the way through. And in this case, the wind was blowing for Labor's way. But also when sometimes the tide's coming out, like, you're able to withstand it because there's a bit of like, let's keep this MP because they're doing a great job. But I think Meryl and Dan both did great stuff. Once again, I think Dan's TikTok game was incredible. Like, just, I cannot more highly recommend going and just scrolling through them. Interesting. Like, it's just an interesting area, right? Like, it's coming home.
Looking at the primary results at Hunter, there was a 6% swing against the Nationals' Sue Gilroy and taking her primary down to 18 points. There was a 6% swing to One Nation, taking them up to 16%. But there was a 4% swing to Dan and Labor, taking his primary up to 43. So really, it was just a shuffling of the deck between the Nationals and One Nation. Nothing changed, and Labor picked up votes, and now it's a 60% 2PP seat for Labor.
Yes, and I do think that's part of it, right? Like, I think I think One Nation's going to be the 2PP. Just looking at the ABC now, like, One Nation running, not necessarily helping. I mean, we're so interested to see what the preference flows are like. But this splintering on the right side of politics, I mean, compulsory preferential kind of helps pick some of that back up. But yeah, and also just quality, just candidate selection, right? Like, Deanne Rapicoli is a really good choice for the seat of Hunter, right? Coal miner, won a gold medal shooting, is like a big personality, like generic. It's all this about authenticity of the candidate. You need a reason to vote for you beyond your what party you've been pre-selected by. You've got to speak to your community, be part of that community, right? In the same way, I think Meryl has got a lot of that connection with her electorate and a reason to vote for it. Like, gone are the days, right, where you can just be like dropped into a seat somewhere that you've got no connection to and no reason to run. Like, go for it, right? Like, we've seen that. Like, so I don't know. It's interesting. When those results started coming in, you knew it was over for Dutton.
Yeah.
And obviously, when Dickson came in, you knew it was really over. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to your point, it's something that I've taken away from, even down in Victoria, South Australian state elections over the last two cycles. The quality of our candidates has meant that we've got good results. I know that makes sense. Like, people will be listening going, well, of course, Stephen. But it really it matters now. Like, it really matters now. Like, politics is becoming far more local, and you just can't get away with just parachuting any rando into any kind of seat and expect the community to gel with them. It's not going to fly.
People got choices, right? They've also seen, and we're going to probably talk about this in a second, right? Like, there's independents out there who have built brands that people really want to vote for and are going to keep.
Yep.
So people got choices.
Let's go to Gilmore. I have an apology to make because I said on our, I think when we did our form guide, that I said I think we were going to lose Gilmore. You were nervous about Gilmore anyway, but you never made a call on it, to be fair. But
that is true, and I'm happy to take any. If you were giving me money, I'm happy to take your money for you losing the bet, but I'd have to give it back to you because I wasn't ready to call it. And once again, like, the little campaign that could, like, Gilmore, great campaign, really strategic. Fiona's an excellent MP. Similarly, got a story to tell for her electorate. Andrew Constance, I think he really pumped his tyres up. Like, I mean, there was a piece, I think, in the Herald a little while out saying, something like, I can't remember it. The piece was either Labor might keep it, but maybe the momentum's gone, or Constance is going to get it, but maybe that momentum's gone. Either way, it was a tempering of someone's expectations. The end result, Fiona's built on the result. This is what Constance's like fourth tilt for federal politics. I don't know, man. Like, there's other things to do with your life. I think take the message. Like,
yeah.
I was joking, open a fish and chip shop in the South Coast. That'd be good. I don't know. Like, Fiona's here to stay. She's done a great job. Good campaign.
And he had, Constance suffered a 7.5% swing against you on his primary. That should be enough to tell him, Andrew, go, you're done.
Yeah, there's other stuff. But he was a cabinet minister. He was treasurer, from memory, right? He's definitely transport minister because we know that one for sure. We've had a lot of disputes with him. There's other things to do. It's all right. But yeah, great campaign. Like, built on. I'm just looking at the results now, right? Fiona built on a primary. Constance's came down. It looks like there was an independent that picked up just about what Constance lost. The dynamics didn't help for him, I guess, and preferences mustn't either because she's also cleared up on the 2PP. So another great result, really good, and very happy to see Gilmore in the column, right? And now on a 5% margin, right? There's some room in that. You can build on that.
Yeah. And then the last one that we talked about was Robertson.
Yes, Robertson. This is where my folks live. I have a vested interest in Robertson being a Labor seat just because my parents live there and I told them they're only allowed to live in a Labor electorate. Another great campaign, like I said before, their campaign was very focused, right, on building out Dr. Gordon Reid's message, and I'm very deliberate about the Dr. Gordon Reid, right, because the core flute said it. There's a stethoscope around the core flute. It's very clear what he does for his electorate and his connection. And an electorate in an election where, and I think they played this really, really well, an election where cost of living and access to health became key features, he was right there to work that and to win that seat. I'm just going to bring up the results now, but I know they were emphatic, and I know that they were good. Like 7% swing on the 2PP. What did he get? Something like 44 on these primary increase. Lucy had gone backwards from the last election. Another one of those things where I think he ran a great campaign. They built really good momentum, and Tide was going the right way, and they were able to ride that in a big way.
Yeah,
and in the same way that I think I'm gonna make a prediction because I think it'll be fun. Robertson's always the marginal seat. I said this to you. It's always the one. I think Gordon's the guy that's going to turn that around. I think that's going to be the one. There will be a day where young Labor kids do not have to be driven in buses to Robertson.
Yeah, well, I mean, right now he's sitting on a 2PP of almost 60 points. So, I mean, that's one of the great things that's come out of this campaign, as you said at the top of the hour, is that a lot of seats that have always been marginal and squeaky bum time every time we go to an election, these MPs can have a bit more breathing room. Not that they need to put their feet up, but it's some fat there, that's sort of some insurance, I guess, you know.
He'll just keep working. I know him really well. He'll keep working. I also know his campaign manager, a good mate of mine. She will not let him stop working either. Like, she'll keep going. They built a great campaign locally. They got lots of local volunteers, and I reckon that if there was a duo and a team to sort of cement that safe for Labor over time, I could see that on the cards.
Hughes and Banks were the cherry on tops for us on election night. We didn't even talk about those in the preview episode, but I just want to get your reflections on there.
It's not too late for us to go back and make bold predictions about either of those seats in the last episode, is it?
Unfortunately, no. It's that's public now.
Producer would kill us. I don't think on a lot of people's radar. I think you did start to hear a few rumours that something's going on, particularly as the tide was coming in. And I'll keep going back to my thesis around how these seats operate, right? And it sounds like I'm talking a talking point, but I genuinely think this is how the strategy played out. Good marginal seat MPs who built a narrative, who built good infrastructure, who didn't make unforced or forced errors, good candidate selection. They built, there was a good piece in the Herald, I think, unpacked this a bit. They door knocked a lot of people. They talked to a lot of people. They did the right thing. Like Z, who I know is great, is absolute legend, totally deserves to be in federal parliament. Like, he's got a real star status to him. This is I think his second run at the seat, so he's been putting the time and the energy in for the seat of Banks. And then in Hughes, our candidate, there was a great piece in the Herald about, his connection to the seat goes back long enough that he's door knocking people who are like, oh, I know your dad and your mum, how you been? Like, that real community, and really just focused on winning the seat. So, I don't think on the radar for a lot of people. I said you did start to hear some rumours, but ultimately they ran great campaigns. And so when the tide and all the other stuff, the macro message, the earned media, when that was going their way, they were there to ride it. And I would say that if they had not been in such a good position, that might not be the case. Which just tells you, if you're an MP, if you're a candidate running, just knock on doors, call your mates and get them to come out and do street stalls with you. Just do the work. You never know your luck in the big city, right?
Yeah. And I mean, interestingly enough, Z only had a 0.5% swing to him on his primary, but the Liberal incumbent, David Coleman, lost 5.5 points on his primary. And as you said, just luck in the preference flows, and Z gets a preference swing on a 2PP of 5 points, and now he's a member of Parliament off to Canberra.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I think just have a look there. Coleman wasn't helped by the trumpet of Patriots running or anything like that. There's a bit of that stuff as well, but ultimately, good campaign. He gave people a reason to vote for him.
Yeah.
That's what campaigning is, isn't it? Right? Just giving people a reason to vote for you.
Oh, I mean, that's one of the stories that came out of this whole campaign, is that there is such a thing as campaign effect. There was a narrative starting to kick around our world that was like, campaigns don't make any difference to the outcome. And, well, it turns out that's bullshit, because seats like Banks is down to, campaign effect, the work that you do, and that's what you get out of it.
Yeah, you just got to work. You got to work those electorates. You got to work the seats. I always think that the seat I learned all my campaign experience on was growing up in the seat of Greenway, now held pretty comfortably by Michelle Rowland, right? Perfect example. Yeah. You work hard, you show up, there's no off-season in elections, right? You're working the whole time, you do your time, you do your energy, you put it in, the voters reward you for it.
In our post-election episode with Feeney and Jesse McCrone, David sort of said he was disappointed that we didn't pick up Fowler. I just want to get your thoughts on what happened there.
Similarly disappointed. I think there was something going on there. I think, and I would make the caveat about my comment about good campaign and riding in the tide, right? Because the dynamics in Fowler are different, right? When the tide was going against the Libs and for Labor, that was helpful in all those seats where we're running a good candidate and the Libs are running a lackluster seat. They're probably not really resourcing. Fowler, absolute knife fight of a seat. Everything in the kitchen sink thrown at it. I've heard some shocking stories from polling workers about just the experience of what they've seen from some of the opposition candidates. Di being an independent makes it harder to tie her to the national narrative of don't risk Dutton or the risks of Dutton, or the what would you get if you got a Liberal government. That just said, was absolutely worth running the campaign. Tuli is an excellent candidate. She worked so hard. I think she had a second child during the campaign and just, took the time it needed and then got back out on the stumps and did a really good job. But it's a really tough seat, and it's a real challenge for us about what do you do with those independents, right? Like, how do you win a seat back like that? I think it starts with the candidate selection. I think that's helped a lot. It starts with working hard, and I don't think Tu's going anywhere, right? Like, I think she's in it to win it. She'll be working that electorate. She'll still be showing up for her community. We'll be there in 3 years' time.
Yeah. The independent incumbent, Di obviously benefited from preferences from the Liberal Party. It looked like it just went straight from five and a bit points from the Libs straight to Di, and that was enough that got her to keep her job, basically.
It doesn't hurt, no. I mean, also there were those yarns running during it, right? Like, there's a bit of tying. Like, she was formerly a Liberal councillor, famously had a big falling out with them over a pre-selection battle, but still has some, it's alleged there's still connections with the party and the local branches and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, preference. It doesn't hurt if the party come in third. Preferences, yeah.
No,
as a general rule.
No. Want to get a sense? Let's head out to the western suburbs in Watson and Blaxland in particular. Obviously, there was a lot of commentary in the media about this Muslim Voice campaign that was springing up and the impact that would have on Labor heartland. Did it have any impact at all?
Yeah, let me just try and pull these up, right? I think, in the end, both seats returned reasonably comfortably to Labor, but I don't think it was all a sort of storm in a teacup situation. I think there's genuine, and both those MPs, Jason and Tony, would tell you that there is great concern in the community. They're seeing what's happening overseas, and it's important they've got to speak on behalf of their community. And I think they're some of the best advocates for their community in the parliament, and they've rightly been rewarded for that in terms of work. But that's the community placing trust in them doing that work. It's hard to know exactly what the result will be, or what the sort of impact was. I see that the Libs are basically tanked in both, and it's 2PP against an independent. Some real questions for Muslim Voice. Is it a flash in the pan thing? Is it a sustained grassroots organising piece? I understand there might be some councillors involved. It's one of those things where, is this a long-term challenge in these areas, or is this because of the dynamics of everything that has been going on overseas and what we've been seeing in the Middle East? Is that just the heightened moment right now? It's hard to know, really. But the end result, I'm looking at Jason got a swing towards him in Blaxland, right? He's picked up votes there, and hopefully it gives the party a bit of comfort about some of what it's doing, but also, even if anything, more license to ensure that we're speaking on behalf of the communities that vote Labor and the communities that we represent. And where we have Labor MPs, they should speak on behalf of their communities about what they feel and what they see and what they expect from their MPs.
And the other ones I wanted to sort of look at was, and we looked throughout the whole series, as folks will know, we didn't really talk about non-Labor contests because this show is just about trying to get Labor into government. But I am interested. I just don't give a shit about the Teals. I just don't. Anyway, but stuff it. Let's talk about them quickly. McKellar, Wentworth, Warringah, all Teals seats, all held. There was a Lib theory coming out of the head office that they would win Teal seats back that were supposedly held by what they viewed as lefty-type Teal MPs, Zoe Daniel being one of them in the seat of Goldstein and Monique Ryan in Keong down in Melbourne. I get a sense that McKellar, Wentworth, Warringah were never in doubt for the Teals. Was it a contest up there between the Libs and the Teals?
I don't think so. This idea that there was like I said, there's a theory in Liberal HQ that we're going to knock off lefty Teals because they're voters who voted for that are going to look at Peter Dutton and everything he stands for and say to themselves, well, that's the government I want to prop up, right? Just let's go back to this first principles, just bad strategy, worse execution, whatever, right? the Teal MPs, I think, have done a really good job in representing their community. Like, we don't agree with them on everything. Industrial issues, there's almost certainly some differences. But they represent that in their community. Like, they speak to, like, just that, like, representing your community, speaking on behalf of them, looking like the community that you represent is like 60% of the job, right, to get started. I also think that, like, if there was a view, like, I was pitching to people when we were getting into the campaign, right? Like, Dutton's clearly got this two-term strategy, right? I'm not a candidate for the Teals. I'm a candidate for outer suburban areas in Queensland, Sydney, Melbourne. I'm going to win on these, like, working class, cost of living, views about, immigration and its impact on housing. I'm going to focus on. I'm not even going to bother with the Teals seats. Now, that's not even my, like, as I said to everyone, you don't announce a nuclear reactor if you are planning on winning Wentworth, right? Like, you can't. They're not the same. Like, they're not the same strategy. Or if they are the same strategy, then that is a real problem for whoever you are paying for your strategy work, or you're doing it in house. And I thought the strategy was they'd win these outer suburban seats, force Labor into minority government with the Teals, force the Teals to either make Labor do stuff that they wanted, or Labor get them to do stuff that they wanted, and then run a campaign for 3 years on them. Essentially, what they did to Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott. Right, yeah. That was my nightmare scenario. They set up the play. But then their terrible execution of the suburban strategy has meant that they have kissed away those seats, because you're now looking at some of these margins that people like Rapicoli's on. And now what chance do they have to come back at these seats? Like, the Liberal rebrand or the rebuild, does it start in Paterson, or does it start in Warringah? And that's probably a huge fork in the road for them. And I've got on about, because I really enjoy discussing how they are bad at things.
Well, I mean, that was my kind of second last question for the show is, like, how fucked in a tunnel is the New South Wales division of the Liberal Party at this moment?
Yeah, they got some problems, almost certainly, like, from, putting in, I mean, from all accounts, they got their nominations in on time this time.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, there's something in that for them. Another one of the first principles of campaigning.
That and how to votes. Got to get the how to votes right as well. If you can't tell a voter how to vote for you, you're in trouble. Yeah,
there's a real problem. There's like 3 essentials: candidate selection, nomination afterwards, and then putting them on a piece of material you hand out to people. Yeah. I cannot wait for the books that are written about that campaign HQ, and I cannot wait for the spilling of just the backstory. I just cannot wait. Like, if anyone who's got me for Secret Santa, just knowing this is what I want. I just want whatever I want, 10,000 words or whatever Nikki Sava's giving. That's what because I almost certainly, like, I've heard all these stories about there was like 3 teams running strategy, that Dutton's office was running apart, that the HQ was caught out of it. Like, I've heard people say quite positive things about some of the campaign operatives in the New South Wales branch, but clearly just like bad operation, and like that's the other part of our campaign, right? Logistics. Like, people forget just how much of doing a good campaign is just like having the right people in the right places with the right teams and having processes. And from all the commentary, and I'll just give a really selfless plug because I am such a huge fan, obviously, of CHQ and the people that work in there. I think Ericsson's excellent. I'm also a huge fan, obviously, of Jennifer Light, my wife, who works at the ALP NatSec as National Assistant Secretary. They ran such a good campaign. They were so disciplined. They did such a good job of just holding all those pieces together. And you could just see the lids kind of crumble under the weight of, like, I can't remember which one of our ministers said this, right? Like, they had an energy policy. The moment they had contact with people, it fell apart, right? Like, that's these things sound good in the Liberal Party branch meeting, but they don't actually when they're out. Like, just amateurs going up against total pros.
It was just, I talked about it in the last episode. I'm stunned. I'm still stunned. I was stunned a week ago, and I'm still stunned by this fall from grace from this, what was once this formidable national campaign operation.
Sick it into my veins. The backstabbing, the leaking. When these books come out, I cannot wait, because there's going to be stuff about, like, who they chose for their ads and research. Like, I think this is the first campaign that Crosby Textor or CT didn't do their stuff because of all the falling out over The Voice. Like, is there a lesson in that? The spokespeople they picked, the decisions, like the seats they went to, the fact that Dickson wasn't on their radar till so late in the game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd love to be the third person just flying the wall for your Queensland episode, just listen to like, what happened in Dickson. Like, clearly, Ali France, just excellent candidate. Another one, good candidate, representing the community, ran a good campaign, no own goals. Amazing.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Last question. How much money did you make, Todd?
on Sportsbet. I couldn't possibly comment.
I had a friend of mine who is not in politics. He's a Labor person, but he's a punter because I think he might own part of a horse, maybe the leg or something. I don't know. But anyway, he loves a punt, and he messaged me on sort of Friday night saying, I saw your form guide you put up on social media. Just can you give us, which ones do you actually really think? And I said, mate, I don't know. Like, I don't have the polling. But anyway, I would say this one. He messaged me on Sunday morning saying, I owe you a bottle of whiskey for your advice. And also there's a number of federal MPs I need to get their details because they're on my Christmas card list. Todd, thank you so much for your time on the show. It's been great to have you both before the election and afterwards. That means that you're now a friend of the pod, and whenever I want to talk about New South Wales politics, I'm calling you up and you're coming on the show. That's what this has come out of this.
That's what that means, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to my merch whenever that arrives.
Indeed.
We're going to get some Dunn Street merch. But yeah, staying Stephen, it's been great to be back. So good to be doing this version of the second show.
Okay, let's head across the Tasman. No, Bass Strait. Wrong way. Whoa, that was lucky. Almost ended up in New Zealand. Let's go across to Tasmania now and talk to our good friend, our regular Tasmanian/Canada correspondent, Jack Milroy. Jack, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Well, we kind of are the New Zealand of Australia, so I think that's okay.
You are a little bit. It's I've done a bit of work in New Zealand with the party over there, and I constantly in trainings accidentally keep referring to the New Zealand branch as the New Zealand branch of the Labor Party, and I'm basically implying it's the New Zealand branch of the Australian Labor Party because it just does feel like that. Like they use Campaign Central. They basically kind of sound like us, but a little bit different. It's like Bizarro Australia, even the Labor Party. Even that you kind of know your way around the Labor Party over in New Zealand, even though it's not the same frigging country or the same branch, but it just kind of feels like home, but not completely.
Yes. And then to help, we just steal their best campaigners. Shout out to Reid Fleming. We just take them over here and deprive New Zealand of them.
We really do, and not just the Australian Labor Party, the Victorian branch of the Australian Labor Party. We've got a lot of Kiwis that their brightest and best have come over here and helped us win a lot of elections, so we're certainly indebted to their skill sets. Anyway, we're not talking about New Zealand, we're talking about Tasmania, the other state. Let's just do a quick overview of the state-based results. For Labor, we had a 9.4% swing to us on our primary vote, taking our primary up to 36.6 at this time. This is Thursday, Arvo, we're taping this one. The Libs, or the Coalition, had an 8.5% swing against them, bringing their primary down to 24.5. The others, which I'm going to name this time because normally I haven't done this in the other episodes, but there was a 2.5% swing against others, dropping their primary down to 19.4. That's interesting. Right? That's a big cohort of voters voting for other. Greens fell a point, down to 11. One Nation picked up 2 points, up to 6. Trumpet of Patriots fell 0.6, down to 2.5. 8,900 people voted for Trumpet of Patriots in Tasmania. Basically, Sweet FA voted for Trumpet of Patriots across the country, and they had a swing against them. I don't even know why we talk about them because they're not really that relevant anymore. But the good news is that we had an 8.4% swing to us on our two-party preferred. So now Labor's two-party preferred in Tasmania is 62.7%. That is huge. And Jack, when we had you on the show to do the preview, we were kind of like status quo in Tasmania. And that's the case. Man, what happened?
Well, look, I think if anyone had told you before election night that they knew this was going to happen, they are absolutely lying to you. Like, there was a red wave that swept over Tasmania on election night, as it did over the whole country, but more so here. And what happened? I think there's a few factors. So the first is, I think if you recall in 2022, when there was a swing back to Labor nationally, that swing was not reflected here in Tasmania. I believe we had a small swing against us when we formed government in 2022. So there's a bit of latent swing, or like a catch-up swing, if you like, that was kind of ready to go. And then I think when you layer on top of that the national swing that happened, you put those two things together, and that's how you get the sizable 9.4% swing in Tasmania to Labor. A couple of other things I would call out that were important. First, The union movement down here ran a really effective anti-Dutton campaign. You would see their materials, billboards, organisers, door knockers everywhere, in the trademark kind of ACTU union kind of purple and yellow that they've adopted the last few years. There's not many colours left on the Australian political spectrum that you can choose. And I certainly think a purple heavy palette is preferable to the Your Rights at Work orange heavy palette, and also that's been co-opted by others. So strong campaign from Unions Tasmania. A strong and professionalised campaign by the Labor team this time, especially as compared to some previous elections. We had a lot of good campaigners down here that had worked elsewhere for the party. We had some folks from UK Labor, really strong campaign that executed well on the ground here for us. And then you combine that with the kind of the third factor, which is a really poor Liberal campaign. And nothing I'm really saying here is kind of that different to stuff that happened nationally. And, what we've seen around Australia in this election is that, like, there's local factors, there's different campaigns, there's different candidates, but, the swing is on, and this seems to be what happened. But particularly in Tasmania around the Liberal campaign, I believe Dunn was only here a couple of times. He didn't offer any policy announcements that were particularly relevant to Tasmanians. There's two places in Australia kind of where political campaigns diverge a little from the national narrative, and that's Tasmania and Western Australia. And the Liberals did not run a particularly strong campaign that was focused on Tasmania and Tasmanian issues, and I think they paid the price for that. So those are the three things I'd put it down to.
I had a sense of deja vu from the 1993 federal election, showing my age a little bit there. But
I was going to say I don't have strong memories of that one.
No, but I do recall that night that the entire island swung to Keating and the Labor government. And early, the results came in quite early, which sort of set a trend for the rest of the country. This time around, I wasn't even looking at Tasmania when I was checking the first round of boos coming in across all the sort of marginal seats. I was going to go and check the two seats that we talked about in the preview, but I hadn't got there yet. But then someone sort of grabbed my shoulder and said, we're doing really well across the board in Tasmania. What I found interesting is that Tasmania always, to me, presented an opportunity to just quickly grab a bunch of seats that can be a part of your bedrock of if you are going to form our government, because it was that Howard did well in Tasmania. Keating in 93 did well in Tasmania. And in the last couple of cycles, it's been a bit patchy, right? There's been, obviously, Clark's been helped by an independent. Labor's had a couple of seats and the Libs have had a couple of seats. For the fact that the Liberal Party didn't look after their home base, but also, if we were worried about Lyons, why weren't they going in there and actually trying to, build a beachhead and then take Lyons off of us? So it's interesting to hear from you to say that the Liberal Party's CHQ did not resource with visits from the leader or come up with policies that would be attractive to Tasmanians. It's such an oversight, and I just don't understand why.
Absolutely. I mean, look, Tasmania is a small place generally. It doesn't occupy a big kind of space in the national consciousness, and, that filters up to the way political campaigns are run too. The local Liberal folks who ran the campaign locally here have been very critical of the national campaign publicly and privately to me in my conversations. Senator John O'Doniam went on ABC radio basically straight after the election and just called out Peter Dutton and the terrible campaign that was run in Tasmania. Now, clearly, this is what happens after a leader loses his seat, and there's recriminations all around. And who knows, everyone likes to shift blame and et cetera, et cetera. But that to say, I think that from my understanding, from talking to some senior folks in the Liberal team locally, was that they knew that the election in Tasmania was slipping away from them from around 10 days out, and they kind of hit panic mode, and the national CHQ in Sydney for the Liberal team did not kind of ride to the rescue.
Fascinating. Good. Glad they did that. Should we start to look at some of those seats? In fact, we can probably run the rule over most of them because it's, as you said, it is a pretty small place. But let's do the ones that we won to start with. We did talk about Bass in the preview episode, but you weren't feeling confident about it leading up to the election. But we won. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of both the two party preferred and the primary for Labor in Bass?
Yeah, for sure. Labor ended up with a two-party preferred of basically 58 to 42 in Bass, which is almost a 9.5% swing, an 11.2% swing on the primaries, up to almost 40% primary vote. You recall Bass is the electorate previously held by Bridget Archer, who kind of styled herself as a maverick Liberal MP, famously crossed the floor against Scott Morrison during the Morrison government. And was able to kind of define herself as a real kind of community champion. I think there was a national swing, so you can talk about individual things and candidates and stuff. I think generally this was going to happen, regardless of particular candidate factors. However, I think once Bridget Archer was in opposition, it's much harder to grab attention as a maverick. It's much harder to stand out from the crowd of Liberal MPs when you're not in government and you're not taking on your own prime minister. So I think she lost a lot of that kind of sheen of being this community champion, kind of quasi teal Liberal. And I think that the value proposition for voting for her kind of drifted away in the last 3 years. Labor candidate Labor candidate Jess Teasdale, local teacher, energetic campaigner with a good campaign team, took advantage of that.
Yeah, right. I mean, Bridget Archer's primary collapse. She lost almost 8.5 percentage points off her primary, whereas Jess and the Labor campaign picked up 11 points on their primary alone. Yeah. So that is huge. So you talk about this national swing that happened, but the thing I'm trying to understand is why did it happen? What is different this time around than 3 years ago in Bass? Why is this move off of someone that I can't name too many Liberal MPs broadly across the country. I can name Bridget Archer. She's got a national profile, but she lost out badly in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a big swing. When Tasmania swings, it tends to swing together, is what we notice. And that makes sense demographically because it's quite homogenous, so that would track. But yeah, those results reflected in Bass. And once we saw those Bass results coming in, that's when we knew that Tasmania was really going to ride a red wave on election night.
Fascinating. Let's look at Braddon. Another one just not on. We didn't even talk about Braddon in the last episode.
No, and I think anyone that would tell you now that they knew that Braddon was going to flip or certainly was going to swing by 15% on the two-party preferred is pulling your leg. I certainly did not think that Labor would win Braddon at all. I'll absolutely cop to that, but I'm not alone. I just said it out loud. So yes, Braddon, former Senator Anne Urquhart, now member for Braddon. Labor won, 57% of the two-party preferred, a whopping 17% swing on primaries to, again, get us to 40%. Labor getting 40% on primaries in these sort of marginals is it's not back to, the 80s, but it's kind of in early 2000s level for where we used to sit with our primary. Yeah. Something that I should mention, and this applies to all electorates and the Senate result as well, is that the Jacqui Lambie did not run lower house candidates in Tasmania in this federal election, and she did last time. So there's a portion of the vote that would ordinarily go to Lambie that may have drifted over to One Nation. Some of it may have gone to Trump and the Patriots, and some of it would have gone to the majors as well. So that's something to just keep in mind too when you're looking at these swings. It's not a massive amount. It's not like there was 30% voting for Jacqui in the last federal election, but there'll be some. Those votes had to go somewhere. Anne Urquhart, well-known local in the Northwest, really took on the issue of salmon farming, pro-salmon farming, and made kind of a name for herself in the last couple of years around that. Effective campaign, but honestly just a massive swing. What can you really say? There was just a huge swing in Braddon that was quite honestly shocking to a lot of people. I think it was about 4 days before Election Day, and the Prime Minister came to Tasmania, and it was like, okay, Prime Minister's coming to Tasmania. That's not surprising. But it transpired that he was flying to Braddon and then leaving Tasmania to go to do somewhere else on the mainland. And the fact that he would go to Braddon and Braddon only and not just swing by Braddon on a visit to Bass, I think was a signal that CHQ knew in the final days that there was a big movement in Braddon.
Huge. Let's look at Lyons. Rebecca White, obviously a former party leader down there in Tassie, was running for the federal seat that overlaps her state district that she held for many years. This is one of the seats we did talk about, and we were, you and I were privately nervous about Lyons before Rebecca was pre-selected. She comes in, we start to feel a little bit better once again. Didn't need to worry. No. Things came out really well for us in Lyons.
Yeah, formerly held by Labor MP Brian Mitchell. Rebecca took over I think late last year. Labor had a 10% swing on the two-party preferred to a 61% TPP, 14% swing on first preferences. Rebecca and her team, well-resourced, ran a long campaign there. The Union's Tasmania team also focused very heavily on Lyons from the initial days of that campaign and did a lot of door knocking, letterboxing, and kind of visibility stuff there as well. Lyons is a massive electorate. It's 50% of Tasmania's landmass. It stretches from the outer suburbs of Hobart to the outer suburbs of Launceston and all the way up into the northeast. It's a wild electorate to try to campaign in. It's tough, but the Labor team really pulled it out there.
One of the things that I think we're going to talk about across all of these different seat-by-seat analyses across the country is that those seats that Labor did hold that were marginal and no longer marginal, it was 0.9 going into this election, and now Labor has a nice big fat margin to protect going into the next election 3 years from now.
Absolutely. And look, we know also that politics is more volatile than ever. And I don't think Rebecca or anyone else would presume that they go into the next election with an actual 14% margin. You know, big swings are big swings. Obviously, you know, we're in a much better position now, particularly with the benefit of incumbency in all of these seats. But the team will be aware that this was a wave election, and waves go out as well as waves come in. So there'll be a lot of local on the ground work to do in those seats now to shore them up for next time, and I'm sure they're working on that.
Yeah, in baseball we call it insurance runs. You might be up, 2-1, in the 8th innings, and then you get a couple of home runs, and now you got some insurance there just to make sure you can close out on the 9th. And I think that's mindful for us. It's a way of closing out the win in 3 years' time when you do have a nice big fat majority, as opposed to going into an election where you're holding on by less than a point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's look at Julie Collins's seat of Franklin.
Franklin was a bit of a scare on election night, and listeners might recall that we discussed this briefly in the pre-election pod, and I kind of noted that there was a little bit of something happening there. There did end up being, as we predicted, a kind of two-candidate race between the independent Peter George, anti-salmon farming campaigner, kind of teal-adjacent former ABC foreign correspondent, and Julie Collins, the long-time Labor incumbent. Early on in the night, there was some indication that things were not going well for us. But as the night went on and we became more aware of which booths were coming in and which booths hadn't yet, it became clear that Labor would hold that. However, there was a 6% swing away from Labor on two-party preferred terms, with a smaller 2.3% swing to Labor on first preferences, and a whopping 21.5% swing to Peter George, who was a first-time candidate. So it was really one of those weird races where, like, the primaries don't necessarily tell the story of the race, because this is not a traditional two-corner Labor-Liberal contest. Things kind of got scrambled with the addition of an independent and a Green and a Liberal, and another independent who was a Liberal-aligned independent. So it was a bit of a wild contest, perhaps more reminiscent of a Hare-Clark contest down here at a state election. So a little bit of a scare for Labor, but overall, the seat's been held with a healthy margin. Julie received 40% of the primary vote. Crisis averted, but of all of the seat competitions in Tasmania, that was the one on election night that stood aside a little bit.
Yeah, the independent picked up a 21% primary. The Liberals lost 8 points and the Greens lost 7 points. So you can imagine
the Greens candidate wasn't actually eligible to serve in Parliament.
Fair income.
Unfortunately, yeah, he's a young kid, 19 years old, by all counts, like a good kid and a good activist and all of that, but found out that there was a citizenship issue quite late in the campaign, and withdrew from campaigning and said, "Look, I'm not." You couldn't get his name off the ballot, I don't think, by that point, but said, "Look, I'm not eligible. I'm not a candidate, really." And then there was some sort of backtracking on that, and then the Greens state office said, "Well, we are supporting, them," and rumors flying around about whether the Greens are backing Peter George. Bob Brown backed Peter George. The Greens brass locally said no, continue to vote Green. So a bit of a shambles all up, but ultimately wouldn't have really made a difference with a 40% Labor primary.
And the only chink in the armour, independent Andrew Wilkie continues to hold the seat of Clark. What's your take on Clark?
My take on Clark is that we have a shot when Andrew Wilkie retires, and only Andrew Wilkie knows when Andrew Wilkie will retire. It is a seat that Labor should hold. It's a seat that Labor has started to do better in state elections recently. Demographically, it works for us. We need to be developing a candidate to take that seat on rather than changing to a new candidate every few years. Labor campaigns in Clark don't get particularly well resourced, particularly in an election like we were in, where at the beginning it looked like we were going to struggle to hold on to Lyons. Yeah. Obviously, that changed over the campaign. So, if you're a Clark candidate, Heidi Heck in this case, worked hard, you don't get a whole ton of support nationally, and candidates understand that. But, when there is a change in the competition there, when Andrew Wilkie is not around anymore, we have an opportunity to win that back.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting open race. How long is he going to stick around for? And also, Andrew Wilkie, what's he actually done in recent years?
Yeah, Andrew, in the early days, like, do you remember the 2010? Yeah. I think he got something to do with the Hobart Hospital or something like that. He got funding for the Royal Hobart Hospital off Gillard at the time in return for supplying confidence, something like that. It's a long time ago now. He advocates on issues. He was big on the Assange issues, but in terms of local delivery, no, I wouldn't say that there's been a whole lot that he has driven. The federal Labor government the last 3 years has invested some here, but typically, not to complain, not to be a typical Southern Tasmanian Hobartian, but if you drive through the roads in the north and the northwest, they're a whole lot different to the ones in the south, and that does align with marginal seat status.
Yeah. Interesting. Last question I've got for you before we close out. Jacqui Lambie in the Senate.
Yeah.
What's going on there? Give us an update.
Yeah, the latest I heard, I think from friend of the pod, I don't know if he knows about the pod or not, but Kevin Bonham, local Tasmanian psephologist extraordinaire, was that there are 2 seats still up for grabs in the Senate in Tasmania, and they are likely between a Liberal, Jacqui, and a One Nation candidate who is also Pauline Hanson's daughter, and with an outside shot at Labor picking up a 3rd spot. So, it's a bit hard to tell at this stage, but I think the fact that Jacqui Lambie is down to the last 2 or potentially 1 spots is a shock to people. I wonder, from a campaign mechanic, by not running lower house candidates, you probably have less people handing out how to votes all around because you have less candidates invested in getting their own friends out. Jacqui had people at polling places, but, if you're running candidates in every seat, you activate their networks, you activate their friends, you get a whole lot more Senate how to votes in people's hands. That's one. However, everyone knows who Jacqui Lambie is, so how much of a factor would that have been? I don't know. I wonder if Tasmanians are starting to think about what they get from having Jacqui Lambie in the Senate, what is actually being delivered versus what is being said. So it's very interesting, actually. I don't think that this was predicted.
It's super interesting that your state has had a history, certainly, of electing rogues in the Senate on various political flavours, Brian Harradine being, one of them for a long, long time, constantly getting returned, right? And I kind of thought that Jacqui was here to stay for a while. Obviously she's still got a chance of getting re-elected, but not being in a death seat. That's the thing that surprised me a lot. And it's interesting just for you to say that there's a reflection there amongst Tasmanians about what does she actually do as opposed to what she actually says.
Yeah, Tasmanians will always reward vocal parochialism in politics. But after a few terms, I think Tasmanians also are practical and want to look around and like, okay, well, what did we get for that?
Yeah. Funny. Anyway, well, we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Jack, great to have you on the show, as always. We need to do a Canadian election recap. And I was at an event last night and someone grabbed me and said, when's Jack doing, no, I'm not shooting you. They said, when are you and Jack doing the Canadian election recap? And I was like, dude, give us a break. Like, we've got a lot of seats to recap in Australia. Like, I can't, it's not my fault that the Canadians organised an election at the same time as us having ours. So we need to do this, Jack, is the takeaway.
Shout out to the one fan of our Canadian election pod. It's great to know that you're out there.
I had two people have asked me in the last week or so.
That's great. Yeah, let's do it. There's a lot to unpack there. It's fun. Very close majority. Did you see that the Liberal Party won a seat in Quebec by one vote? Wow. They took a seat off the Bloc Québécois by one vote. So don't ever let anyone tell you your vote doesn't count. One vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, let's do that. Once we've finished doing all of these Australian election recaps, let's get you back on and we'll have a look at how the Canadians did.
That sounds great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Stephen.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And a massive thanks to our newest paid members of our Socially Democratic Patreon community, including Yorick Piper, Finbar Bray, Angela Inglis, Mr. Champion, Roger Sidome, Danielle Evans, Trav Dowling, and someone who goes by the name of Quantum. I think you might be a Bond fan, so I'll just call you Q. If we've missed out your name, that was not intentional, so please send us a message on Patreon and we'll sort it out next time and shout you out. Thank you to those people for joining our Patreon community. We really, really appreciate it. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.